Is your ego your enemy? This is a question that's been asked for maybe thousands of years. And a lot of traditional spiritual practices would argue that yes, your ego is an illusion, it's not real, and it is the cause of a lot of the problems that mankind has always had. But what is the ego really? Let's give it a clear definition as to what I'm speaking about when I use the term ego. Your ego is your self-identity. It's your way of making meaning about the phenomena of life. It's the way that you define yourself and the world around you. It's your personality, your persona, your way of interacting with people, interacting with reality. Your ego is what you would normally define as you. When I'm speaking to you, I'm speaking to your ego, your self-identity. Now, back in 2017, I read a book by Ryan Holiday called The Ego is the Enemy. And it's a great book where he goes throughout history and he uses stories of great people who eventually their ego became their downfall. And he illustrates how ego is your enemy because it holds you back from true greatness by giving you the illusion of self-importance and elevating you above reality. And eventually you will come crumbling down. Right around the same time, I was doing my yoga teacher training, in which, a lot of the Eastern philosophies and religions talk heavily about the ego, especially Buddhism, Hinduism. And unless you have a very deep understanding of these spiritual practices, here in the West, we usually just get the superficial aspects, especially when it comes to the ego. And most people have the understanding that your ego is your enemy, that it's an illusion, that it's not real. And a lot of new age spirituality is centered around this idea as well. And honestly, this is for a good reason. If you look out in society, you see so many examples of people driven completely by ego. You look at social media, all these dudes on steroids with their flexing in the mirror, all these girls with fake butts, fake faces, doing their little modeling on social media, everybody on their highlight reel showing how great their lives are. This is all fueled by ego, and a lot of people run their lives this way, and so there is a rejection of this, and we throw the baby with the bathwater by saying all ego is bad, all ego is the enemy, we should try to minimize it, we should try to kill it, we should try to destroy the ego, and only then can we have true freedom. And I'm here to tell you that that is not possible to destroy your ego, because it is your self-identity and your way of relating to the world. And instead of attempting to destroy your ego, we should work towards developing it, maturing the ego past the stages that I'm going to outline here. And at the end, the ego transcendence will come. And you realize at the end of the road, when your ego is fully matured, fully developed, only then can you transcend your ego. So the problem of society, when we look at all these things and we're like, that's fueled by ego, that's ego, that's ego. It's not that ego is the enemy. It's that these examples are of poorly developed egos, immature ways of relating to the world. And so I want to introduce you to the work of Susan Cook-Greuter, right? Now, this is a research paper that I printed out, and I listened to a 5-hour lecture about this model. This is a model, a developmental psychology model of how the human ego, which is just your self-identity and the way of relating with the world and creating meaning, develops through these specific stages. Now, I'll eventually make a long video going into detail about this because this is extremely interesting. And if you have a desire to learn more about yourself and the world, this is a great place to start. Now, it is advanced, it is a heavy read, so you have to be into this to really get into it. I'll put a link in the description of where you can find this research paper. The thesis of this developmental psychology model is that the human ego goes through 9 stages of development, all the way from when your consciousness comes online, when you're about, 2 or 3 years old, all the way through to wherever most people get stuck and stay in the specific stage that they get stuck in for the rest of their lives. So I want to talk more about the conventional stage. Right? There's 9 stages. The conventional stage is smack dab in the middle, stages 4, 5, and 6. Beginning with the conformist stage, right? A lot of people in our society today have egos that are embedded in the conformist stage. And this is basically where you are trying to conform to a group, where you feel this identity with your group, and the distinction, the boundaries between yourself and this group are blurred, right? If someone attacks this group, they're attacking you, and you feel that emotional response of anger to lash back out. Everything falls into 2 categories for a person with the conformist development of their ego. 2 categories: good, bad. Us, them. Very black and white thinking, right? A lot of people fall into this. Especially look at American politics today. It's all black or white, red, blue, point the finger, us versus them. Easy to understand, right? The next step is the expert. A lot of people fall into this category where their egos get satisfaction from gaining knowledge to have the upper hand on other people, to have superiority over other people through your success, through your knowledge. Still a very immature form of ego. And then the final stage of the conventional stage, but still right in the middle, right? There's a lot of steps afterwards to really develop into. But this stage that a lot of people fall themselves into, even myself, integrating this as we speak, is the achiever stage of ego development, where all of a sudden you start thinking 5 years ahead, 5 years back. You start having a better understanding of who you are. Self-reflection really comes online at this stage, and you start to ask questions of legacy. What lasting impact will I leave on the world? And you get satisfaction from creating a difference in the world. You might say, this sounds like the final step of ego development. Well, it's not. You still have the post-conventional and then the transcendent stage. But I'm not going to get too in detail on this model for this video. But I want to introduce you to the idea that no, your ego is not your enemy. Your ego is your way of making sense of the world. And when we point the finger at examples throughout history or today, and we say that is fueled by ego, that is ego right there. The problem is not ego. It's that we're looking at an underdeveloped, an immature sense of ego. That is where a lot of the problems come from. People not maturing their ego, not developing, not gaining new perspectives, as well as overly identifying themselves with their ego. You see, your ego is part of you, but you are not your ego. You are the space behind your ego, the space behind the storyteller. You are that pure awareness. Integrate your ego, integrate your shadow. It is a tool on how you interact with the world. Develop it, mature it. Don't make it the enemy, because your ego is not your enemy.